episode of the Investor Spotlight podcast. If you are looking for some inspiration, today's guest is going to be great for you. His name is Humza Chowdhry of San Jose, California. He's been an investor for 10 years, focusing on flips and rehab. Thank you so much for joining us today, Humza.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here with you guys today.
Thank you. Well, why don't we jump right into it and tell us a little bit about your background.
Okay. So I was born in a town called Teaneck, New Jersey, and I actually have lived mainly in California my entire life. And I grew up in Fresno, California. In the Central Valley, people out there know we don't get a lot of love. We're known as being in the armpit of California. But yeah, I grew up in the Central Valley, California, and I was raised by a single immigrant mom. I'm a first generation Pakistani American.
Awesome. And so along your journey in life, what made you decide, hey, I'm going to get into real estate today and I'm going to start this real estate journey and see where it goes? How did that come about?
Well, it wasn't that long ago, 2006 and 2000, I had graduated college. I was excited to start my career. I actually studied structural engineering and construction in my undergrad. And I was excited to get started. And when the financial crash hit, like most people, I was unemployed. I was sitting on my mom's couch watching Bollywood movies every single day. And my mom looked at me one day and said, "Son, you got to get a job." And I was, at that point, no one was hiring, and I felt very helpless and hopeless. And I was actually up late night one day watching an infomercial from one of my mentors, Dean Graciosi, on how to get started with real estate investing.
So we went from being on mom's couch, trying to figure out what in the world am I going to do with my life.
Yeah.
And then this infomercial just comes on with Dean and just inspired you to take the next steps to real estate investing.
Yeah,
So
it was incredible.
What were those next steps that you took?
Well, so I actually ordered the book. So Dean was doing an infomercial about buying his book. I was really excited. Coming from a non-entrepreneurial family, my mom, the first thing she said was the people who show up on these shows are actors, and that was obviously very disappointing to hear. But understandably, from someone who's struggled her whole life and worked sort of 9-to-5 jobs, and to survive and to sort of keep our family together. And so I was very optimistic. I felt like a good connection with that infomercial. I ordered the book and actually got really excited and just started reading as soon as I got the book. But like most people, I got midway through it, got a call for a job in San Francisco, and found myself moving and sort of putting that entrepreneurial dream of getting into real estate investing on the bookshelf.
And what book was it that you read?
It was like a real estate investing book that he had just put out. It was I believe it was his second book that came out, and he was talking about just all the different cycles that we see in real estate, how to get started, talks about flips, certain market conditions, things like that. And, like I had mentioned, it was such great information for someone who was ready to take action. But for me personally, just not being there and ready at that time, and for it being a new journey, you get excited for that moment that you're reading it, and then you sort of just forget about it the next day.
Yeah, I think that happens to a lot of us. We get excited about doing something new, but then we don't take those action steps that we need to actually get it done. So you went and you started a new job, and then when did the real estate come back to you? When did you decide, hey, I need to pull this book back off the shelf and get back into what I was originally going to do?
Yeah, so like most people, you start a new job, you're excited, you're thinking that it's going to be a different job than your last job, and then you realize that it's a J.O.B, which is just over broke. So probably I'd say within 3 months of being at that job, again, the economy was still doing pretty bad. I was definitely very humble to have a position, but I also knew that this was sort of a building block to where I really wanted to be, and it wasn't necessarily something I saw myself doing in the long term. So it was probably, I'd say, within the first few months, I had picked up that book, and I actually just was at a cafe, and I just started diving right back to where I had left off, realizing that now that I had a job, I still needed to potentially go this direction to really fulfill that, the dream, the American dream, of really being just, true freedom, having freedom in my life financially, mentally. I had worked tremendously hard at this new job and found the same corporate politics, being weighed down on me, being underappreciated, all the things that most people face today in their jobs.
Right. So, what was the first experience like whenever you went out there and made your first deal? What did that look like?
So I was really excited about getting involved. Didn't really know where to start. The book was a great foundation for me to know sort of what the game looked like. So what happened was I had connected with a real estate agent from Fresno, which is where I mentioned I was from, and they had just introduced me to actually to people who are already doing that, right? So if it's, for example, an intimidating process to get started in real estate, a lot of times it's not hard to locate people through a network of either real estate agents or other folks that are already doing what you want to do. So in this case, I actually got connected one to someone who was doing it. I got to see their projects. I got to see how they were doing it. I got to shake their hands, and I got to see what their vision was and how they were doing it, just to kind of get my feet wet with what the
Mhm.
process looked like, at least from the acquisition side to the renovation side, and just to start learning about the process.
Okay, so for new investors who are out there that want to get into flips, would you say that would still be a great avenue for them, is just to find somebody out there who's already doing it and speak with them and gain from their knowledge? And do you feel like people out there are willing to share that information?
Yeah, I totally think so. One of the issues that I have a lot with successful people is that they're all the way at the top. And let's assume that you're just getting started and you're at the bottom, and there doesn't seem to be a good program to be sort of a stepping stone to get to a massive amount of success. So again, when you read a book or you read something and you see a massive amount of success and you've had no success, it's hard to get motivated by that. So what I like to do personally, and what I found was, right, by connecting with people at zero cost. So this should not cost you any money. If somebody wants to teach you, train you, or have you invest with them, they should not be charging you any money for that type of a service, because you will ultimately be investing with them, which is what I did with this individual. So when I went and I saw his projects, I got into what he was doing. I learned about what he was doing. I inputted on what things and asked the right questions in terms of what I was curious about. And when we found that it was a good match, I felt comfortable enough with some type of obviously written agreement to invest some money into his next project to get my feet wet. Not because I wanted to see myself as just as an investor, but just because I wanted to go through the process again, as you know, what happens once the money is sort of there and now you've acquired a property. What does that look like all the way to selling it, where I would actually get my money back plus some rate of return? That information, that individual, none of that cost me actual physical money. So, a lot of people out there are trying to sell this real estate knowledge
Mhm.
at a cost, which again, for most people who don't have that kind of money to spend thousands of dollars on training, they don't need to do that. What they need to do is find, your local real estate agent, or, networking events where you can connect to these people who are already doing it, which, now we're in 2020, there's just hundreds of thousands of people that are out there doing this type of work.
Right, absolutely. There's so many forums online too, and you can
Yeah.
find other investors out there. So maybe that's an avenue. If people
Yeah.
don't know anyone in the area, maybe they're new. Hey, hop online, find a
Yeah.
find
Yeah.
a
Crowdfunding is huge right now. So a lot of people are trying to gather a lot of folks. People realize it's, better having a crowd than one person. You can tackle a lot more real estate. So getting together and set some type of crowd fund just to get your feet wet, watch it from the sidelines, take some notes, and then go out there and find your own property when you feel like you're ready.
And you've definitely done that. So you've been doing flips now for about 10 years. How many flips do you think you've done in this 10-year period?
So I'm actually I've always had a full-time job. I run a full-time design, engineering, construction practice. Flipping has actually been a side business of mine, sort of a side hustle, if you will, for about 10 years, as you mentioned. And so I'd say I've probably done about 3 dozen or so homes. I've done properties in the Bay Area of California. I've done them in my hometown of Fresno. I've also worked on out-of-state properties as well, where you can start finding a lot of deals because of the fact that there are up and coming areas around the country, especially when you have a saturated market. It's harder to find deals. So I found it as a good side business while I'm still doing my full time work. Is something that's great for side income. Obviously, it's a passion of mine as well. Being in the engineering construction industry, I have a passion for beautiful, nicer homes, make improving properties in forgotten neighborhoods and things like that. So it's been a great side hustle for a while.
Yeah, and it's something that really touches your heart. It's something that you're really into, and you've even made a website that shows the flips that you've done. What's the name of the website if listeners out there want to see what your success looks like?
Yeah, so I actually created a website a few years ago. I just wanted to post some of the work that I've done. If you visit, it's www.your your your dream estates. So it's DREAM dream, and then estates estates.com. Yourdreamestates.com. You'll see some of our work, and take a look at some of the before and afters.
And along with doing flips and having that website, you're also the owner of HC Structural Engineering. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. Uh-huh.
Okay, and tell me a little bit about that company and what you do there and how that could relate to investors that are doing flips.
So basically, I founded this company about 11 years ago. Same thing with any of my companies. I found that I could drive more value and passion for what I do. I found that structural engineers tend to be very antisocial, hard to reach people, and so I started an engineering practice. I became a licensed professional engineer in California and started my own practice. Was really excited about it, and just started doing just the basics. Answering phone calls. Talking to people, communicating, just trying to do better, really help them, handhold them as necessary, not look at them as an object, as a customer, but looking at them as a human being, showing them that I really care. So the company has been very fortunate. We started with a lot of residential work. We've grown into doing a lot of commercial work, educational work, things like that. And we've also grown into another construction company, which essentially, once we've designed the plans for these projects, we go out there and build them. So again, it's just another avenue for me to show my passion for buildings and towards better construction, and obviously not taking shortcuts, which we see a lot of investors do. If you want to be an investor, keep in mind that your reputation is also on the line. If people find that you're investing and you're selling a home and they see that you take shortcuts or you're doing shoddy work or you're hiring the cheapest contractors, then that's also one of the things that could be detrimental to your success, especially if it's something that you eventually want to grow into a full-time business. If they know that you were involved in that project and that you have a history of sort of taking shortcuts, that could lead to a bad reputation. So with me, I take my reputation very seriously, and I think that sort of referral network that we've created from people who are very excited about what we do and what we offer has really grown us into be sort of more of an organic company. We don't go out there and buy ads and pay people to recommend us. A lot of our growth is organic, and because people are just really genuinely happy with our work. And I think that takes a lot about just showing people that you really care about them. And if it's a house that you're flipping, that you really care about the family that's going to move into that property.
Mm-hmm. And so if someone is doing a flip and they are realizing that, hey, I don't know anything about construction, I just bought this property, it needs work done, how could they reach out to you to have you take a look at that property? And is there certain areas that you stay in or?
Yeah, so if it's anything in California, that's a lot of what I do. They can email me. They can obviously shoot me a text. I'm always happy to help, happy to always grow and help people and motivate people. Personally, for me myself, if you don't know construction, what I did personally is I'll never forget my first property. I actually had gotten a friend, an angel investor, which is how I get most of my investments, to pitch in some money. It was a $60,000 home, so it was low risk in my opinion, for any type of downfall or housing downfall. And I literally just sat in the front porch and called 6 or 7 different contractors, and I brought them to the property. I had them walk the property with me. By that time, I had a pretty good idea what the scope of work should be. So you should generally have a list of things that you want to improve. Traditionally in flips, we're talking about, potentially upgrading the electrical, paint and finishes and things like that. If there's any structural, if you've had a structural inspection during the acquisition process, maybe addressing some of the structural concerns, because that's what most people are afraid about. And then just having that scope of work, and really going through each contractor and walking it through them. How comfortable am I with this person? What kind of referral list do they have if I'm asking for one? I had one individual, young gentleman, who was asking for like $10,000 up front. I mean, that right there was the red flag. I give you $10,000, which one is against the law, California law, because any licensed contractor can't ask you more than 10% or $1,000, whichever is less. And that's once you have a contract. And here's this young gentleman asking me for $10,000 up front, and I don't know what's going to stop him from driving away. So the most common mistakes I can see young investors face is just not knowing the rule of the land, the law of the land, excuse me. And that means you need to have formal contracts, you need to have a detailed scope of work, and you need to have an agreement. And you need to also screen out multiple contractors and make sure you call the referrals and their references to make sure that they are, in line with your expectations. So that way, once you've committed a certain budget to a project, that you don't go over budget.
Absolutely. That is great advice. You got to do your homework, even
Yeah,
whenever it's someone that, it's a contractor that say that they're reputable. You don't really know that if they are or not, if you don't know them personally. So you do have to do your homework all
exactly.
the way through the process. So in doing flips, what's the best piece of advice that you could give someone who is new? We've already got, find an angel investor, partner with someone for the first time. Make sure you do your homework on, when you're doing construction renovations. What other challenges have you faced that you think people may go through and need some advice on?
Yeah, I think that great question. I think that again, going back to the contractors, making sure that you know exactly what your scope of work is, knowing that the person that you're about to hire is a competent contractor that has the proper insurances and all the things that could potentially, if let's say one of his workers gets hurt on your project, that they can't come after you, that they're properly insured and bonded, and they have the workers' comp. Understand that this costs a little more money when you're hiring a contractor, but know that that's there to protect you. What I would say the number one mistake that young flippers make, that was definitely I'm very guilty of, is definitely over improving a property. So you go in, like I mentioned before, I'm very into creating the perfect property for the next buyer. I don't
Mm-hmm.
look at my bottom line, which, as an investor, that's the whole point of doing the project. So my first property, I wanted to over improve it. I wanted to get rid of the hardwood floors and do, bowl sinks and all these crazy ideas that I had to make something nice and modern. And what I realized was, one, you got to ultimately, it does stick to your bottom line and where you need to be for it to make sense for you to even do the project. Second, not everyone wants that type of home that you may have envisioned in your mind. So if you're in a neighborhood that is very traditional, that people love the old school charm, they love the way that the windows, you go, get pulled up through a pulley system versus a traditional system. There's so many little details that people love in these older homes that have more charm. Don't go in there and just gut everything and make it nice, new, and modern in a neighborhood that clearly doesn't demand that. So really, it's know who your audience is, know who your buyer is going to be, know where to stop and not try to over improve the property. Don't under improve it, but don't over improve it. So again, we're talking about things like, don't go crazy with your finishes when clearly that's not going to help with your resale value. That's another problem, right? We spent all this money on the backyard landscape and then we didn't put any money in the kitchen or the bathrooms, right? So traditionally, the kitchens and the bathrooms are where you want to focus your attention to detail. And then if you have a leftover budget, then yes, do a nicer landscaping job in the back. Ultimately, it's what they're going to see is what they, the potential buyers is what's in the front, what they see when they drive by. So that's what you really want to focus on.
That's great advice. And you also are in the process of writing a book. Is that
Yeah,
correct?
yeah, that's
Tell us
correct.
the name of the book and a little bit about the drivers behind that.
Yeah, so I actually got, for someone who never read in my entire life, it's interesting that I am writing a book. It's called Time to Fire Your Customers. And the reason why I decided to write such a book is I realized that for many years, there's this myth out there that says that customers ultimately are what drive our business. And yet, if you look at the sort of market of businesses, we see hundreds of thousands of businesses each year that fail. And they don't fail because they don't have customers, or not necessarily just customers, but they fail. And I really wanted to know why. And through my own experiences, what I realize is we've put so much focus through the customer that we forget about our employees. We forget about what we call company culture. We forget about the people who ultimately deliver our messages, and deliver the product. And what I realized was that not all customers ultimately are good for your business. We have the time killer clients, we have the frugal clients, we have the clients who are, the freeloader clients. So we have all these clients out there, and we can look at some of the traits and the personalities. We can look at, are we actually a proper fit for this individual? Not all business is good business. And what I like to do in this book is focus on how you can build a network of clientele that will be sort of your front line for your business. And when I say front line, meaning that they're talking about you, they're excited about you, they went through an amazing experience with what you had to offer. So they're telling their friends and family about it, which again, organic growth, right? Not
Mm-hmm.
paid ads, not trying to, find ways to grow your business because you have so many bad referrals that you're having to market yourself. Have these people be the front line of your business, so that instead of having them to believe your word, they're taking the word of their friends or family or people writing online reviews. And that's another thing too, is a lot of times people talk about bad experiences, but they rarely write reviews on good experiences. I've had
Mm-hmm.
customers, my wife and I own a retail shop, and we would always have people who've had several good experiences, but the moment they had either an experience that wasn't in their favor, they'd decide to write a 1-star review, and they never talked about all the good experiences they had. So we're in a day and an age where, online reviews are the new norm. And what I thought I could get through this book is really help business owners and people alike understand sort of what I think their ideal customer base is for their business, and how they can hopefully grow organically by finding the right folks for their offering, because not everyone's going to be a good customer.
Absolutely. And this translates to so many types of businesses. And as a real estate investor, it translates to who's going to be buying this home or who's going to be renting this home. And what you're saying is that you can actually be selective, and it's better to be selective with who you're allowing to buy your home or rent your home based on these different aspects that you've found over the years.
Yes, exactly. It might be a slower route, it may be a slower road, but ultimately it will get you to your destination and where you want to be, just with time and patience and finding the right candidate. It's the same thing if you're an employer trying to find the right candidate. We all know what happens when you find the wrong person, the employee. The whole tree can get sour really quick, really fast. So definitely time and patience, but also having the tools and the knowledge and the know-how on how to pick up on certain traits so that you can find the right folks for your business.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much. We've covered so much information here about
Yeah.
flips and what to look for, and how to be selective with your customers. That way you can have the type of growth that you want. Is there any just outstanding piece of advice that you want to give to our listeners right now to just get them, up off of their seats? And they may be the ones who are sitting there reading the book halfway through and sticking it on the shelves. Like, is there anything you want to tell them just to get them motivated to get out there and get started?
Ultimately, what I would say is it's really what drives you, whether it's listening to this podcast or reading a book, is really just your why power. And I think ultimately you have to look inside on what drives you to do what you need to do. For someone who grew up with a single mom, immigrant, we grew up on Section 8. We had several obstacles in our life, mainly financial. My white power every day is just through the roof. I have no excuses. I have a lot of passion for what I do. Again, a lot of it's rooted in that growth. So I think for a lot of people, it's really just to look deep inside of you. It really starts with you. It's not things that I have to say, but it's really finding your passion for why you want that change in your life, why you want to take this sort of step potentially and look into real estate investing, and understanding what that looks like for you, writing it down, committing to a schedule, committing to it. Again, this could, people get excited when they listen to what seminars and webinars and podcasts, but then it's what do you do after that? So if you have the why power, which again is very sort of inexplicable, that's going to be something that will never slow you down. In fact, that's going to be the thing that keeps you going, even during the times where things don't turn out in your favor and they're not going to be rosy, where maybe a contractor doesn't show up, maybe the home takes longer to sell. So ultimately, I think it's going to be something that really sit down and understand why you want to take this direction. And if you do it, put 100%. Don't do 0%, don't do 10%. You got to put 100% into everything you do, and let that passion bleed off to other people and let them see that.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much. I hope the passion that you have is going to overflow into our listeners, and they figure out what their why is, and they write it down, and they move forward. You shared a great story today. Thank you so much for joining us today, Humza.
Yeah, thank you. And like for anyone who's interested, I am on Instagram. Feel free to follow me. It's Humza Chowdhry. It's Humza, and the last name is Chowdhry, Chowdhry. Follow me on Instagram, and hopefully I can add some value to your life. Thank you.